um, just have a chat really and share some of what we're doing to prepare for everything that's going on with the virus and the effects of that on our business, on Escape, on everybody else. Everybody's feeling the effects of it. So we thought it would be a good idea to kind of go through some of the things that we're seeing, what we're doing, how we're preparing. And then obviously we've got Ben and Stacey, and we're going to go through all of this together. So for those who don't know, Ben and Stacey, Ben, would you be happy to just say who you are, why you're here, kind of what, it's a bit of a intro.
Sure, thanks, Skye. Thanks for inviting me along. So I worked with Escape for the last 5 years on and off, helping run the startup program. Also with Virgin Startup on helping people get loans, which is something that's going to be important at the moment. Prior to that, ran ecotourism business for a decade, which I'm glad I'm not doing right now. I really feel for everyone in the travel industry. And I'm currently running Rebel Book Club, which is helping people accelerate their reading habits.
Great. Thanks. Thank you so much for joining, Ben. Stace, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am currently the co-lead for the Escape Career Change Program. Superpowers being helping people with the practicalities around career transition, including financially. So that's my own side hustle, is helping people with financial well-being and money coaching. And then I'm also a freelancer myself, and have had some contracts cancelled. So I'm just sharing how I'm dealing with that and managing my own personal finances.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. So to get started, I mean, obviously there's lots of things that we can go through, but what would be great is if people do have specific questions, if they can just pop them in the chat, then we'll be able to come to those as and when. We've obviously got lots of things to cover before then. More or less wanted to go through 4 things. So finances, team, sales, and kind of marketing in a time like this. And then also like how to manage it personally. So mindset, personal finances, all of that sort of thing. So that's kind of the plan for the next 56 minutes. And we'll get through as much as we physically can. So I guess we'll start with the finances, because that's probably the main concern for a lot of people. I know at Escape, 70% of Escape's business is a job board. And as you can imagine, in the last, I would say 10 days, people have stopped hiring for a little while, or a lot of people have, specifically because we work with small businesses. So we've seen our revenue drop off by about 80% probably in the last 10 days, which is of course worrying when you have a team and we have bills to pay, etc. And one of the things that I've been doing is working on financial scenarios, and I think it's something everybody has to be doing. I'm sure you all have budgets, you all have plans, you all have thought about what you think is going to happen in the next 12 months. For me, I've made 3. I've actually made about 10, but I've got 3 that I'm working from. I've got an okay scenario, which is basically taking 40% off of everything that I thought we were going to make this year. I've got a not great scenario, which is worse than that. So it dipping to almost 0 for a few months and then hopefully picking up towards the end of the year. And then I've got survival mode. So that is just kind of stripping everything away that's possible and actually just thinking maybe we're going to be at 0 for quite a long time. And mocking those out, and I'm doing it in Google Sheets. I'm happy to share templates if people are interested to see how I've done it, to try to be really inclusive with all of our spending. But I think what's really important is to have the different scenarios and think about what are the decision points that you need to make big calls on sales, on products, on team, on all of those things, but actually really looking at those financial scenarios. And I know that a lot of people are not making you don't feel like you can make the time because we're kind of in a panicky mode right now, but actually this is really important to get that stuff right. So I'm very happy to share what I've been using so people can have a look at how that works. But having those different scenarios for us is really important so that I'm not going to be surprised. If I'm pleasantly surprised, that would be great. but I'm not going to be negatively surprised. And I think being prepared in that way is really helpful. I don't know, Ben, how you've been approaching the sort of financial scenarios and your projections for the rest of the year, and any changes you've made as a result of that.
Yeah, we were fortunate at Rebel Book Club that we raised a round of crowdfunding in the end of last year. Well, maybe not fortunate from our investors' point of view right now, but we're going to, like everyone, we're going to go down together and hopefully come up together at the other side. Yeah, so the main forecast shift that we've made is this, I've just done, is saying, okay, we were going along at this rate. It was pretty clear where we were going, especially in terms of new members joining our club and paying their monthly subscription. We're expecting that to go to 0, and anything else is a bonus. Now we're about to roll out a bunch of new ideas, which may or may not work, but really it's kind of just going back to like, okay, let's work from retention of our customer base and the revenue that comes from that by giving them lots of value and support and all sorts of other things. And then secondly, if we can creatively grow in other directions, then this is a time to try it. And I think the mindset around finances for me is I just signed 3 contracts with our freelancers 5 days ago, knowing that we were about to crash this week as an economy. We could see it coming last week, and there was a moment there where I thought, well, we should be signing these. I could probably just about run this myself, and that's an extra £7,000 a month that we don't need to spend. We don't have to spend over the next 3 or 4 months. But then, in terms of that small team, 1, they're doing a great job. 2, if they suddenly all stop doing a job or being on it, it's going to be a lot harder to deliver anything new or valuable. And 3, it's about them and their work and their own careers as well. So we've committed to another 3 months with that team, which was a financial risk, but I think it's the right decision for us.
Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think the first thing, I've heard all kinds of things from other people about, they're cutting freelance, the freelance contracts, they're making people redundant right away. All of these things are happening, and sometimes it is something that does have to happen to keep the business alive. But I think that as much as possible, keeping that as a last resort, or you're thinking about the long term, which I think is also important in these scenarios of there is going to be a post-coronavirus future, and actually trying to minimize the disruption so that you can be ready for that time to make the most of those opportunities. Because it's very tempting, of course, in the moment to be like, okay, that's a massive cost, let's just get rid of that. But you have to then obviously in the future onboard all those people, find new people, it's a whole nother effort to do that. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's something that I think a lot of people are thinking about. If you have to, obviously if you have to make people redundant, how can you do that with care? And how do you do that in a way that you can give people as much notice and support as physically possible, but also, not taking too many short-term decisions if you know that actually you're going to need those people to set you up for the long term.
Yeah, and it seems at the moment the government, this has all happened in the last 24 hours, right? But the government support that's coming is focused on employers and businesses at the moment, and not on freelancers and self-employed people. So I guess if we're going to support anyone, that's where our focus should be. Yeah,
totally. I know, Stacey, you had some great, thoughts around this and kind of how to manage that conversation with your freelancers and kind of have the conversations as a freelancer with employers as well. Do you want to share any of that with people? I think that'd be really useful.
Yeah, sure. Gosh, all the things. I think if you're working as a freelancer, this is always my first tip with money, but even more so in scenarios like this, is just being really open and honest about your current situation and asking them about their situation. Not only does it really improve the relationship, but it allows you to plan with a little bit more confidence, and also potentially opens new doors. Like if you really understand the situation that the people that you're working with are in, then potentially you can identify more creative and different ways that you can work together. And I can share some links around if you do need additional financial support, like where to go to apply for universal credit, a phone number that you can call, like a Corona small business hotline, and ask them for some advice. And then there's various things that you can do with your own personal expenses to try and cut some of those down. So, being super, super optimistic, which is really difficult in these times, this is albeit a forced opportunity for us to really see how little we can live on. And being ruthless with our expenses and seeing, what's really important to us, where our spending really needs to be, and where we can potentially cut things out. But mind mapping potential other ways for you to generate income in times like this, perhaps doing it as a group of you. So kind of crowdsourcing ideas that you can have to identify new opportunities for different types of income. Being on top of your invoices, making sure like the ones that you are like owed, like chasing up with charm, chasing up on those, and forecasting, where your potential income was going to come over the next 6 months. And in the same way you would as a business, do some scenario planning around how likely those are. Can you be creative around the terms that you're suggesting? Any clients might be willing to pay you a portion up front. So like being creative with some of the terms around some of those invoices, rather than just thinking, am I going to get this income or not? Lots of various things, but I can share some of those resources.
Yeah, that would be.
But having the conversations and being proactive about it.
Yeah, I think that, that kind of being really transparent and being open and honest is really important, regardless of what happens for a team. If we sit as a team and say, look, I don't know this is the situation and this is where we are and this is what's happening, then people can prepare themselves. I think when it comes as a shock and it feels like an external decision that has been put on top of you, which really affects people, that's when that feels really negative. And actually, as you say, being vulnerable and open and honest about the situation that you're in as a business owner, or somebody who's trying to manage a team, I think is a really important part of, as you say, keeping that relationship in dynamic and being a bit more creative about it. I know I made some notes about other ways that you might be able to do it. So if you are in a situation where you feel like you have to make people redundant, there's a conversation. It's all about having the conversation. Is there a way of reducing people's hours? Obviously, contractually, they have a contract, so it would have to be a conversation you have with people. But is there a way of going down to 4 days a week or 3 days a week, or trying to do that in a way where you're keeping people on board and helping to support them rather than just cutting them off entirely? There's obviously the option of seeing if people can take unpaid leave voluntarily. Obviously, that's not possible for everybody, but most people would rather keep their job, and take a little bit of time if they have to. There's also scenarios that I've looked at from an escape perspective where I would stop as somebody running the business to stop to go down in salary and actually see if there's some expenses that can go through the business instead of things that I'm paying for out of my own pocket temporarily. That requires obviously diligent personal finances as well, so being really conscious of what those things are. But it's being creative as people who employ others, being really responsible for those people and feeling responsible for them as well and what happens to them. Feels like, and that includes freelancers, and I think that really makes a lot of sense. So thank you for saying all of that. I think that's important. A couple of other things about finances, I guess, from a business perspective, and then I see there are a few questions we can have a chat about. Depending on what type of business you have, if you have done anything in technology, it's really worth looking at if you're eligible for R&D tax credits. It is going to take a little bit of time to work that out, but for example, if you're creating anything new, if you have any conditions of uncertainty, actually those tax credits can be a real godsend for you. You can get 13% of your costs on, more or less, it's average 13% on salaries for people who work on any tech in your company, contractors that you get in, and any tech costs, and that can include tech subscriptions, that can include anything that you're doing. So actually looking if you're eligible for one of those, that can really inject a big chunk of cash, and actually they're quite good at giving it to you, as long as you've got some kind of justification of how you got there. So it's really worth having a look at if you are working in technology or you have any sort of innovation in that space. There is a business interruption loan scheme. I'm not totally sure how that's going to work at this stage. They're still trying to figure it out, but it's going to be 6 months, no interest. I think at this stage you can already start talking to your banks about it. If you are in a situation where you need some cash, you might be eligible for that. Obviously, for really small people or people who fall in the middle, there's other things that we wish the government would do, like cutting VAT or etc. But they are going to make exceptions for paying VAT a bit late or turning in your tax return a bit late. So actually there's going to be a bit of flex for you. And then if you work in retail, of course, there are lots of other things that the government are trying to do to support you. Right, should we answer a couple of questions? I see you, Stacey, are responding to people, which is great. Well, let's see. I don't know how to do this Q&A. Okay. How are you involving your team in the decision-making processes? Okay. So what we're doing, I can say what we're doing from Escape's perspective is on Monday we had a meeting with everybody in the team, and I shared the finances with them. So where we are, what we're expecting, and just said, this is what's going on, and we're going to, I'm going to be really transparent and open about what's going to happen. And, giving people, at this stage, just giving people an understanding of where we are. I think you have to start from that place. And then when we approach different decision-making points, then it will be more of a conversation of, are there creative ways of solving this problem, and asking people to step up and see if they have any ideas or if they're willing to work on other areas of the business that might be able to generate a bit of revenue. I think it starts with just being super, super transparent about where you're at and kind of having an open mind about it, and that people really respect when you're open and vulnerable and say, like, this is really difficult for us as well. So if they know that you care and you want them to be part of it, I think that that's an important part. I don't know, Ben, if you want to add into that.
No, I think that's great advice, Skye. We're a really small team, so it's easy. We have it's kind of practice anyway, trying to, that I learned with Escape. So just a dashboard that's got all our metrics on, and you actually share it publicly as well. So not just within our team and our members. So yeah, I think it gets harder if you're in bigger organizations. But I think that mindset around, if you are part of a bigger team, initiating how could we together make cuts, or because I think the other thing on finance is looking at your personal finances. If we make the assumptions that the next 3-6 months are going to be at home, what does that mean to our cost of living? And the assumption is that it's going to drop. There may be some extra costs in some aspects, but in other aspects like going out and traveling and so on are going to come down significantly. So it's the gap between what you might be earning and what you need to live off. Is that slightly bigger, or is it maintained, and therefore could you reduce it and propose that to start that conversation at work? So you go down together a little bit, and so that might be one thing to conversation to start.
Yeah, nice. That's really nice. Well, Ben, you've been very creative, so we can, I guess, talk a little bit about how we're adapting business-wise. I mean, from a financial perspective, for us, we've cut all non-essential spending, so things like Facebook ads, we've paused for the moment, and other various things that we're trying to do. But we're also thinking a lot about what else can we do, because as you say, you can either cut your spending or you can earn more money, and like maybe both of those things need to be true at the moment. So what are some of the ways that you're, I guess, creatively kind of pivoting? I mean, Rebel Book Club is obviously, a lot of it can be done online. That's a great thing about reading. You don't have to be in person. But what's some of the stuff that you guys are working on, how you've been kind of approaching, seeing it as an opportunity, as well as obviously dealing with the kind of challenges that are happening at the moment?
Yeah, so the challenge for us is that for a lot of we've been running Rebel Book Club for almost 5 years, and a big part of it has been our physical meetups once a month with a cocktail. Straight after this call, I'm going to speak with Rich. Rich, hi, if you're watching, who's been delivering all our cocktails, at least in London for the last few years. And I mean, that's a really challenging situation, pure events-based business. So we're going to have a chat about how you can be creative around the future of cocktail services. But for our meet, the big shift is like helping our members see that there's going to be real value still in their membership, their £15 a month membership that's not related to a physical meetup. So it's about managing that communication process as people go through this shock right now. Now we're probably way down their list. We're not an essential. We're not something that's going to make a big difference to them, either cost-wise or impact-wise right now. But we believe that with something like Rebel Book Club, certainly from a community point of view, as well as the reading habits side of things, that we can play a really important part in people's lives over the coming months, and maybe a bigger part than we've been playing up until now. We don't know, but we're going to try. So in the last week, the first thing we've done, other than just have lots of good communication with our members, has been set up a reading challenge, free open reading challenge, a 14-day challenge for anyone who's moving to full-time life at home, which is almost all of us now, to set themselves the goal of reading a book in 2 weeks, a non-fiction book, and then we're just sending them a daily nudge. Now, to set up a kind of habit-based challenge like that, tech-wise, is not difficult. And anyone who's been on the Escape programs or is curious about no-code and low-code sort of building stuff online, this is the sort of thing you could put together in an afternoon, and it looks and behaves in a real smart, it's not going to look like a slick app, but landing page, a little form, and then emails that land in people's inboxes to say, hey, Skye, you're on day 3. Remember to upload your little insight from your book, and here's 150 other people doing it. So we set that up, and that's working. That's really nice because it's something positive. Like we're saying, reading isn't cancelled. We can really help you with this. So that's the first step. The other big shift for us is obviously thinking about how we run our events. Because if we're not going to be doing them in person, what does that look like? And what we don't want to do is just another another Zoom call out. This is great for focused conversation, but if you want it to feel much more like mirror what we have at Book Club, which is a cocktail structured conversation around the theme of the book, and then break out into groups and then come some action off the back of it, how can we do that really well? So one of the things we're doing at the moment is looking at different software that's out there and tools for delivering great online events, because there's going to be a lot of this happening. We're already seeing those screen grabs, aren't we, of 20, 30, 50 people coming together to either as work teams or having a disco together or a drink together, a quarantini, and all of these stuff. So there's some really fun creative stuff already happening, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it. As I was chatting to Valentina, who's an escapee and a host at Rebel Book Club in Barcelona, and they're a couple of weeks ahead of us in terms of their isolation status. Yeah. And she was saying that her daily routine includes a live yoga class, a live meditation, and a happy hour with her friends, and that's all outside of work. So her work's, so she's built a social life online already. I mean, it sounds like something for the future, but this is happening. Yeah. And she's saying at the moment it's really fun and rewarding. So that's basically what we want to do. And we actually brainstormed this morning at Rebel Book Club. We've got 18 new ideas, which are also around some book lovers. So we were going to match people by dates. So you could say, oh, I'm really, you fill out a little form, and then we match 2 people together and they go on a book date, obviously via video. We're going to do help people figure out what their next read should be. We're going to try and connect people with elderly to do reading online. Right. There's so many things we could, start to do stuff with kids and homeschooling. There's so many things. I think it seems obvious because it's related to reading and being at home, but for many businesses, look at the cocktail business. How could Rich at Mix and Muddle create a cocktail experience for people at home? It might not be a revenue. None of the ideas that we're looking at right now are necessarily going to be great revenue or any revenue, but they could be great community, great brand building, and great impact. So those are the metrics I think are going to be really important in the coming weeks and months as you once you figured out your finances, you can survive for a little while. And it could be a really interesting and exciting time. But it's kind of, at the moment, it's just like all the ideas and watch what other people are doing, steal from them, adapt it, and then test them. And obviously you can't do all at once, but test one or two at a time and go from there.
Yeah, nice. Do you have any suggestions? Obviously, a lot of people are probably on here have been through an escape program, so they know how we deal with idea gen. But do you have want to say anything about how to? You're always so good with ideas. How do you generate? How do you try to come up with some new ideas if you're trying to think a bit creatively and you're kind of in this headspace of we've got to figure something else out?
Yeah, I think we're all good at generating ideas. What we have to get better at is taking them from like a little something, oh, that's interesting. It's more around observation than actually, oh, wait for the thunderbolt to hit me. So it's like being curious about like, what do I see is going on out there, either with comedians or celebrities or startups or innovative responses to things. I was like, well, what that response to that situation. So yesterday I saw a picture of 4 people sitting in a street, I think in the States, like with a 2-meter gap between them. So an unusual looking image, but actually this is the image of the future. So this is what our future social life is going to look like from now on outside our homes. So what does that look like if you're a book club, if you're a cocktail bar, if you're a school, if you're a, what does the future of like living and socializing on your local street look like at a physical distance from each other? And how can that be fun and rewarding? So it's kind of just observing something, going, and then asking the question, this has got my attention. Why has it got my attention? And what would that look like if I applied it through this lens? And then it's caffeine and conversation, usually. Take it on. And then other people come in and go, that would be much better if we did this. And you're like, yes, cool. All right.
So a lot of sharing and collaborative.
A lot of sharing, a lot of curiosity, and a lot of just being interested in what people are trying to do. And I think we'll come on to mindset, I'm sure, because this is your specialist subject, Skye. But I think one of the hardest things right now is to switch into that mindset that we're having right now, which is like, what if, rather than we're talking about what if it all falls apart. It kind of is falling apart, but what if we could do all these other things as a result? And that, for some people to make that shift, will take maybe a few, if not a few days, a few weeks, depending on their situation. But just stay close to people who are actually trying new things in this space, joining conversations like this, not all the time, but at least once or twice a day. And just follow people who are doing interesting things, and it will spark stuff.
Yeah, nice. A couple of funny pivots that I just saw this morning is that Brewdog is now making hand sanitizer called Brew Gel, which I thought was quite funny. So it's, obviously they're massive, but there are always creative ways of doing things a little bit differently. And I know that, like for us at Escape, what we've been doing is, well, firstly we run our in-person accelerator programs, which are no longer possible to do in person. So the last week we've been doing them online, so in Zoom, in things like this, in conversation, which is a little bit different, but actually enables some conversations that can't happen in the room. So actually there are opportunities to do that, I think, in a way that it's just being a bit agile and being open and honest with people about why it can be really a great experience. Also bringing forward projects that might be better suited to the time. I know that, so for example, for us at Escape, something that we have been talking about for ages, which is in the pipeline, is for the jobs board perspective, we've got full-time jobs, but actually what we've been working on is trying to have projects as well. So it's like the home of all of the interesting opportunities. And that's something that we're looking at bringing forward in the next couple of months to try to support freelancers who currently are trying to get projects, and actually companies who are still in need of help, but maybe they're not able to hire people full-time, or they need some urgent help because people like Deliveroo and Amazon and Gusto and all of these companies that actually their businesses are booming and they need help right now, not going through the hiring process as such. So that's something that we're bringing forward. So it's thinking about, I guess, in your pipeline, for any businesses that have ideas of ways that they might be able to do things in a different way, just bringing some of those things forward instead of, you know, waiting or trying to flog something that isn't necessarily going to be working in the environment that we're in. So that's, I guess, some of what we're doing and how we're trying to do it. And using the team, and as you say, you know, obviously collaborating with other people and asking for ideas and using the talent you have in the team maybe in a different way if they're not, you know, if the whole sales thing isn't working so much, how might you use their time better? You know, reallocating resource, I guess, in the team is also a really good way of coming up with ideas and making them happen, repurposing skills. That reminded me of something, but I've forgotten what I was going to say. Stacey, for you.
I was just going to add.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Skye. I just was going to add to build on what you were saying with the organizations who are booming right now. Booming is maybe not, you know, they're under big pressure, but they're under huge demand. So yesterday I saw that Riverford, the veg box delivery service, they're going from 55,000 boxes delivery a week to potentially 200,000 or 300,000. That's the demand level.
Yes.
Now that's a really exciting moment for business, but it's also, it's likely to collect, you know, so what help do they need? They probably need a bunch of analytical help. They need a bunch of supply chain help. They need a bunch of like communication help. So if you've had any experience in dealing with those areas, and what are the other 10 businesses like Riverford right now, and then, you know, trying to connect with them and seeing if you can, because there'll be opportunities there.
Yeah, totally. I think that's another creative thing for businesses, as you say. There are other businesses who are going to be needing help, like Riverford, and maybe you as a business might be able to lend your expertise, even if that isn't what you do as a business, to consult with companies like that or provide some sort of support opportunities for that. So it is being a bit creative. Stace, I was going to say, you obviously a lot of the work doing workshops in person, etc., is all, you know, a bit up in the air at the moment. What are some of the ways that you're trying to come up with different things that you might be able to do over the next few months?
Yeah, sure. So I'm thinking about doing more online stuff, so courses. I mean, now is an opportunity when a lot more people are even more focused on their financial situation than usual. So how can I do like boot camps and training courses to help people get on top of their finances in times like this? I have a few contracts with big corporates, where as part of their well-being programs with very stable companies, how they're looking after their employees through times like this, and financial well-being is obviously a critical one for them. So seeing if big stable corporates have got any opportunities to offer coaching to their staff. And then, yeah, contacting local communities where there's already an existing large potential customer base that I've not tapped into. So like co-working spaces in Brighton, for example, and what help they might need and how I can offer that. So increasing like how many partnerships and collaborations I'm trying to identify, because it's nice also to try and work with lots of other people rather than on your own at times like this. So
yes, definitely. And I think there's something in what you're saying, and also what Ben's saying about being generous, you know, and I think that actually now is an important time of thinking about how can you get involved and be generous, and not necessarily always revenue generating things, but things that are being generous, because community and this idea of doing things together is actually more important than it has been before. And it's always been important, but kind of more and more so if people are on their own, and we're all going to have an experience of feeling what it's like for, you know, elderly people who spend a lot of time in isolation. We're all going to be in that space, and actually trying to support people and help people is the best way of keeping people to well, obviously, one, keeping you in mind for people, so from a business perspective, but also just making yourself more resilient. You know, I think generosity and kind of being generous is like one of the best tools of being resilient as a person, because it makes you feel better, it makes you feel useful, it brings you up. And I think that's a really important thing for us all to be thinking about, things that we can proactively do rather than, oh my God, all of this crap is happening to me. Actually, what can I go and do that makes me feel better? For us, we're going to do a free online program for people who are facing redundancy for a month. just to try to help people out, because that's something that might be happening to people. For me, that makes me feel really positive about doing something that can be generous and kind to people who are in a place of worry. I know, Ben, you're doing the reading challenges. Stacey, you're doing giving a lot of free advice to people and helping people out. And I think it's something for all businesses and all people, freelancers, whoever, to think about how we might be able to do that together, because that's how we're going to keep it all going. It feels like, anyway. We've got a few questions about tech tools. Everybody wants to know. What tools would you recommend to move physical to digital? What's the best online meeting software packages that are free, except for Zoom? So I know we've used loads of them, but which I can share, but one that we use that is free is Whereby. It used to be called Appear In, but it's now called Whereby, and actually it's free to use. It's very similar to Zoom, but it's actually pretty good. You can have your own room and people can join, and that's totally free. So that's one to check out. We're using Zoom. I've signed up for the Pro. It's only £11 a month to have the Pro. Plus, if you want to do webinars, etc., that's a little bit extra. But from our experience last night, we had 30 people in one, and actually it worked really well. You can do the breakouts. So if you do have a large team or are doing some sort of webinar, Zoom seems to be we've got 45 people on here at the moment. So it seems to be quite a good tool to use, or at least something that we use. There's some bugs, but realistically, it works pretty well. There's a question about what features we use to bring escape sessions alive in the virtual world. There was a really amazing article, Ben, I'm sure you must have seen it, from Seth Godin yesterday. Did you see it? About bringing conversations online from offline?
I haven't read that one. He does write to me every day, along with 500,000 other people.
I'll share it now.
Yeah, do, because it's really amazing. And I think the main thing, if you are going to be trying to bring things online, so if you're trying to bring your business online, if you're trying to do anything, replicating things online that you would normally do offline, it's knowing that it's not about, well, currently we're talking at you, all of you at the moment, but if you're trying to replicate something that's in person, it's making it more of a conversation. So it's not just talking through a bunch of slides or going through as you would if you were standing somewhere. It's actually having a conversation. How do you make the most of the opportunity of everybody's captive attention in one place? The breakouts, live, helping each other with everybody else chipping in. All of those things are really good ways of kind of bringing those things to life. So those are things that we've used that I would recommend. But what other tools are you guys using to kind of move from physical to digital? I know, Ben, you said you're exploring for the book club, for the meetups.
Yeah, so we're looking at something called Hop In.
Okay.
Hop In, and they may have timed their fundraise and launch to perfection if they've got a good product behind it, because their value proposition is to be the online events experience. So they're trying to do the end-to-end. And I think that's obviously something we're aiming at Rebel Book Club, is like, yes, have some of this, but also breakout groups and a whole registration and voting and interaction as much as the real life as possible, if you were in person as possible. So that's one. Google Hangouts is always a good place for free, large conversations, and it's easy to, you don't have to do any login. It's just a link and you're in. So that's always a good one to go back to if you're stuck, I think.
Yeah.
Whereby we use for our team, I think it's a max of 4 for the free one, so it works really well with small group conversations, but we use that all the time, so that works well. I wonder if Zoom is going to hold it together, because they seem to be quickly becoming the global platform for human conversation. So we'll see. And like Skype, maybe it'll make a comeback. We'll see.
Yes, yeah, totally. Stacey, are there other tools you're using? Virtual tools? What sorts of things?
No, I'm Zoom and Google Hangouts.
Yeah, okay, cool. They seem to be the popular ones. For us, seems to be working pretty well. I wish I'd bought Zoom stock about 2 months ago, because it's about 800% up, but what do you do? So there are lots of tools, and we can share. I think a lot of people are already sharing some of the other. Somebody said they use Blue Jeans instead of Zoom, and there's a few other suggestions, which is really great, that we can all share with each other. From a personal finance perspective, Stace, do you want to share some advice for people who are, obviously we've gone through a little bit about the business finances, but obviously personal finance is quite a big part for yourself, and some people that I know are freelancers and they're thinking about their finances, and what are some things that we can do to kind of, I guess, take some control, and that's something that we can have some control over, which can be empowering for people, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I love the challenge of seeing where we can save. So yeah, as Skye said, we have obviously the two levers, make more money or spend less money. I guess the starting point is to be really clear on your own money map. So this is like your balance sheet as if you're a company. So we always think about our personal finances as our cash flow, so money coming in and where it's going out. But often just taking like a snapshot of, in the unlikely scenario, as we're potentially seeing now, if everything stopped, what's my financial situation? So mapping out where your money currently is, how much is there, and how accessible is it? So like, is there any reason that you can't access it straight away if you needed to? So understanding how accessible is it, are there fees if you try to access it, all of that type of stuff. So knowing like your snapshot of your financial situation now, and then anywhere where you have some form of contract, like ideally we don't want any like financial relationship to become transactional, but just so you know where you stand with anything. If you have contracts around insurances, around mortgages, any subscriptions or memberships that you're a part of, your invoices, know what they actually say around the money that you're owed, anything else that you're entitled to, what's part of that negotiation, where you can potentially be creative with terms and negotiations in some way. So you really kind of understand all the potential scenarios that can play out with those. And diarize any key dates. Like, more often, we have so many things on auto renewal these days. Now more than ever, we don't want to be surprised by any like annual payments which we'd forgotten about. So check in on any big, less frequent spends, like tax, like road tax or parking permits, or annual insurances, and just diarize any key dates where there might be some surprising outgoings coming up, so you can prepare for those. Your biggest levers around saving money are obviously your mortgage, your rent, or like your food, and then like a lot of like the socializing and travel stuff has kind of been cut out for us. But with your mortgage and rent, there's loads of repayment holidays being offered now. So it took me 20 minutes to get through to my mortgage yesterday, but I eventually did. I overpay my mortgage, so I was fortunate in that sense. So I've just cut those off and gone down to the minimum payment, but I know that I can call them again if I need a repayment holiday. You might be eligible for a council tax reduction at the moment, and I just put a link in the chat where you can access to see if you are eligible for that. All of your bills, if you have bills on direct debit, there's a chance that you might have been overpaying. So you might actually have built up some credit with any of your bills. And if that's the case, then they would drop down your direct debit payments for a few months. So see if that's possible. Review your subscriptions, your standing orders, your direct debits, like including your subscriptions on your phone as well as your bank account, and just know which ones you want to hold on to. I think it's really important, like now more than ever, that we have a really clear view on what our needs are and our wants are. I would just say within that, given the wider environment that we're in, if you have any capacity to identify freelancers or small businesses that you want to support, how you can make that work. And also if you do have any capacity for investing in your well-being in some way, or how you want to like financially support yourself through, online courses, investing in your skills, or managing your own mental health and well-being, like still do try and have capacity to do that, because that is really important. So if you need to consider any of those a must, I recommend that you try and make those work. If you have any credit cards and debts, what you can negotiate with putting those on hold, and all of the, just make sure you know any of the government things that are on offer, which I've included links in the chat already to, making sure that not only you know what you're eligible for, how long it might take you to access any of that money. So even though you might not necessarily need to do it now, but just know what the lead up time is if you might want to access it in the next few months. Yes, those are some big ones. But yeah, look at the last few months of your bank statements so you don't miss any blind spots. So it's really clear where your money's been going to date, and just have a really realistic assessment of those, like which ones are naturally going to be cut out due to being isolated, which ones can I cut out now, and which ones do I want to hold on to.
That's all great, Stacey. I'm going to do all of those things. I didn't even know you could do half of those things, so that's it's quite helpful. Amazing. I really like the idea of negotiating some of it, so, you know, looking at some of those things and trying to negotiate, as you say, with the mortgage stuff. I think for a lot of people, at the moment, all of the banks are going to be giving mortgage holidays if you need it, for 3 months. Just remember, obviously, that should be done if you can afford to do it, because you will have to pay it later. With interest, so you still will have to pay the interest, you're still going to have to make the payment. So obviously, if you're going to bank on that, if you know that you can do that short term, but just be aware that that is something that people will have to pay, you know, later. So I wouldn't want people to get themselves into trouble if they decide that they're going to go have a mortgage holiday, which I think we would all like to have. If you have a mortgage, have a mortgage holiday, but that the option is available is amazing, actually, and probably will help a lot of people to get through. Feels like, anyway.
Yeah. And then just to, if we are in isolation with partners and families or housemates, anyone that you have a financial relationship with, or you potentially might have to support financially or ask for support from financially in the next few months, again, have those conversations as quickly as possible before you need to have those conversations to manage, you know, relationships and just understand where everybody's at.
Yeah, that's great.
Is it stressful enough without bringing relationships into it?
Yeah, totally. It's a great point. Somebody has asked a question. We can look at a few more questions. What positives or opportunities do you see coming from the pandemic? I've seen lots more people of all shapes and sizes out exercising. I have too. In Brighton, there's no pandemic. Everybody's just running on the beach. I mean, I've never seen so many people out there running. What are some of the positives and opportunities you guys have seen coming out of all of this?
Well, the community, I think, just the fact that people being forced, it's this complete paradox, right? So the one moment we cannot physically hang out together is the moment we are all trying to help each other. And so, like, bridging any of these really awful divides that have been going on in society, this gives us hope. So I just encourage anyone to indulge their sort of community aspirations, or even if that's not something you've been used to doing, like, give it a go, whether it's in your neighborhood, local neighborhood, with one of these support groups, or whether it's online with groups like we've been talking about this afternoon. The other trend I think that's really interesting, if we're looking bigger picture, is the environmental, like the forced positive environmental impact. It's probably early days in the data, but there was this amazing bit of data that came out of China that because of the air pollution being improved so much because of people staying at home around a large part of China, there's been 20 times less people dying from air pollution than there was before, and therefore a lot more people living compared to the coronavirus deaths. So there's kind of all this sort of stuff that's happening, and actually maybe the Green New Deal, society coming together, all those bigger ideas that have been sort of fighting for the last few years to get to the surface, maybe they might accelerate because of this. So that's the bigger picture stuff. But I think in your local lives, it's twofold. It's community, and then it's digital and this is for anyone who's kind of been curious about spending time in like building stuff online, connecting online, looking at business models of how things work on, you know, in the digital world. This is a great opportunity, because a lot of those are the businesses, the SaaS companies. One of the communities I definitely recommend to connecting with from an entrepreneur's point of view is indie hackers. And the makers communities, because they are like, the mindset of those communities is bootstrap by default. So they are kind of the anti-venture capitalist world. And they're like, how do we create something from nothing using these tools? So they're lean, they're creative, they're supportive. You know, the escape communities like this as well. So I would just make an effort to connect with these, and then figure out quite quickly what projects you want to explore, either from a social impact point of view, from a creative point of view, for your own sanity and fulfillment, or from a kind of revenue career point of view. Because you'll never have a better opportunity. If we're all stuck at home for 3, 6, 9 months, there will never be a better time to really explore projects that you've been thinking about for a while, seriously. So yeah, and hopefully we'll see lots of amazing creative things happen.
Yeah, amazing. I think that's we were talking about this last night, about the opportunity of, you know, people not having to commute, people having the energy, people having the time because they're not socializing, there's no excuses, you know, we're all normally so busy, and then all of a sudden we're not allowed to be busy. If you're obviously running a business or whatever, and you're kind of off your feet, then maybe that's a little bit, for some people that's a little bit different, but it is this amazing space to sort of explore and to try things that you've been wanting to do for a while, to implement projects or products that you've been really curious about, and just get them out, because there is kind of that space. And I think also we all have a captive audience, you know, we're all so tied at the moment, because the main thing is just coronavirus. Actually, a lot of people are paying attention online. So the things that you share, people are reading, more people are reading emails, more people are, you know, reading the newsletters, all of that stuff. So there's actually is a lot of opportunity to kind of create value and be out there, and I guess and get people paying attention to the things that you're doing, and kind of test some of that stuff. So I think we've got a captive audience, and it's kind of forcing us to be creative in ways where we might have been, you know, reliant on a single business model historically, and actually it's forcing us to, you know, to kind of diversify and kind of recession proof ourselves, which we all think about doing at some stage, but this is kind of forcing us to really to make it happen, which, you know, it feels scary now, but it ultimately feels like a positive for all businesses to be thinking about how we can kind of de-risk ourselves.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, Skye, the thing that I'm trying to remind myself is that for every one of us, and every one of us who's taking part in this webinar and all the other fantastic conversations going online today, there is another one of us who's on the front line, either in healthcare or other services that have to carry on. And it's thinking about, like, who won't have the time to, unless they're unwell, they won't be stuck at home because they have to be out there. So it's thinking about how we can support those people in their work. A reframe that I heard today, which I really liked, on self-isolation, by Beth Kempton, who's runs Do What You Love, a whole community around creatives, was, what if we thought about isolation, instead of calling it isolation, we looked at it as retreat. So not so much in the holiday sense, but a retreat, yes, from the world and physically, but also a retreat to go back into our lives and use it as a time for introspection and yes, well-being, and all those things that we've been talking about. So that might be helpful in moments where you're feeling like, I'm being stuck, I'm being imprisoned, I'm being this, to think about, how do I create a retreat? I know you and Stacey are experts at this in your own homes, but and workplaces, but how might we create wonderful retreat experiences for ourselves and our flatmates and our families?
Yeah, definitely. We've got one more question. I think we can do one more question, then we'll just talk quickly about mindset before we wrap up, because it's already almost the time has gone. The question, we've got a few other questions which we can answer then after this, but would you recommend new brands or products who are going to launch into market for the first time in the coming months to hold off? What do you think about that?
What do you think, Skye?
I think it depends on what it is, to be honest. Realistically, if you are, if you're about to launch a shop or something retail wise, then it might be a difficult time, but it also might be a great time. And if you don't feel like it's a good time, it's thinking about how could you make it a great time. So it is just like shifting your marketing or whatever the product might be. Fashion accessories, this is the person says it's fashion accessories. Fashion accessories, I don't know that I think it's going to be a bad time. It depends on how much cost is it going to, are you going to have to put out there up front if you do it now versus later. If you have the opportunity to make sales over the next few months, then there's the opportunity to make the most of that. But if you're going to have to shell out a bunch of cash now, then it's maybe thinking about how much can you afford to lose? What does that look like? Again, as Stacey said, what are your payment terms? And thinking about what is affordable for you in this moment, I guess. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly that. And I think there's two sort of imagining yourself in different scenario situations that you can do at this moment. One is, okay, you've worked really, really hard, you put everything into like getting ready for this thing to happen. Is it the thing that's actually blocking you from wanting to quit or stop the effort that you've put in versus the disaster that may unfold or afterwards? So imagine yourself in a month's time, having launched, having not launched, and having done it differently, and how those three things might look and feel. Is it really, what's the worst that could happen if you paused? Because there's all this other stuff that may be a better time. The other thing I think is escape class 101 is customers. So putting yourself in the shoes of your customers as much as possible, asking them how they've been feeling in the recent days, how their behavior's changed. Are we seeing these trends happen? And it might be too short a time, in which case just hold off a little bit. But unless you're seeing positive response from them in terms of behavior change or still wanting to it's going to be a bit of a leap actually, and you've got the time. Fantastic, go for it. And there'll always be surprise hits here, but there will be a lot of losers as well. I think the time is to be creative and do lean startup stuff. And mindset wise, I think the one thing I wanted to say on this was, I remember going to a course years and years ago on expedition training and what happens in a crisis and how do you respond publicly in a crisis to your community. Now this might not be something you have to do immediately, but you might have to do it with in terms of your team or your customers. And it's the 3 P's of crisis response. It's pity, praise, and promise. So pity basically means, it's not quite the meaning of that word, but it's sympathy and empathy. So how do you immediately start to communicate, I understand what you're going through right now. It's really difficult. I've either been there or I've spoken to someone. So it's that's the first bit of your communication, is like, this is hard. The second bit is praise. It's like, anyone who's helping out in this situation, tackle it right now. The firefighters, the first responders, you helping the old lady across the road. Like, well done, you're doing a great job, thank you. And then the promise is like, here's what we can do going forward. We can do this, this, and this. We can't promise beyond that. We've got lots of ideas, but this is what we can definitely do. And if you watch good crisis responders in the media, they'll do this all the time. John Prescott was an expert, which is weird, but he was particularly good at this when he was transport secretary. But yeah, so pity, praise, and promise. If you apply that as a communication strategy to dealing with communities or groups or employees or whoever you need to speak to during this crisis, that will stand you in good stead.
Yeah, nice. That's really nice. Any last tips, I guess, about mindset? I'm conscious of time. We can have a few more minutes, but for me, I can share a few things that I've been thinking about. Stacey, you mentioned it, just taking the time to look out for yourself. If you can maintain budget in your own personal budget, to make sure that you've, whether it's, I don't know, workouts or online things, or if you've got headspace or whatever that might be, but actually making the time, because if you are running a business, if you're running a team, you will be feeling stressed right now, regardless of what your situation is. And actually, somebody said to me once that I've always thought about this, is that you can't pour from an empty cup. And actually, if we're going to need a lot of energy and a lot of innovation and creativity and kind of strength and bravery over the next few months, then actually making sure that your cup is full and making sure that you have the energy to be able to manage this stuff is really important. The other thing is there are lots of companies who are doing really great stuff to help with people's like mental well-being at this time. So Calm, the app Calm, is doing a lot of their premium content they're giving away for free. So if that's something that floats your boat, you know, then that's actually really can be really helpful for people to have a look at. Stay close to people, maybe not in person, but it's not a time, you know, when we're really afraid, we tend to retreat and hide, and actually being open, talking to people, being like, hey, I'm really overwhelmed. That's actually going to be a really important part of the next few months to keeping yourself, keeping your spirits up and your energy up. And then, as I said, I think the best tool to combating hardship is being generous. So thinking about how you can give, what you can give, how you can be supportive of others is going to really help you to feel well supported in this yourself. So those are my tips. Ben, you've got some books. I think you want to
Yeah, I've got three reading recommendations to survive this. Atomic Habits. So I like reading books on productivity is kind of usually unproductive, right? But this is the exception. And I'm speaking on behalf of 1,000 Rebel Book Clubbers as well, who read it with us last year. So it's about tiny changes, remarkable results. James Clear, one of the best communicators through social media on like daily wisdom and hacks. And it's basically all about like, what are the little things you can change to make everything better? So really good on how to live day to day, especially if you're stuck at home. On sort of the stoic approach to life, which is all around how can we like just focus on what we can control and let the rest of it go, which sounds easy, but it's hard to do. And this is a great example of that. We're all on the news. We can't control it. Like this thing is out in the world. And it's like, that's why the fear is so high, because it taps into this human sense of, oh my God, we can't do it. We're not in control anymore. And that's something humans have to learn, right? A bit more. So this is Ryan Holiday's latest. It's called Stillness is the Key, and how to stay calm in a crazy world using those kind of tools. And then finally, I mentioned Beth already about this idea of retreat versus isolation. This is her book. She's an expert on Japanese culture and philosophy and wisdom. It's called Wabi Sabi, and it's around the Japanese idea of living in a perfectly imperfect life. It's much more than that. It's sort of like embracing imperfection and just being really at one with all of that. And so, yeah, those would be my recommendations for, you can get through 20 books in the next 6 months, but for at least the first few weeks.
Great, thanks, Ben. Stace, do you have some tips for maintaining, I guess, mindset and well-being in this time?
I guess this is, well, when it comes to money and financial well-being, it's very easy to attach guilt and negative emotions to money. So just being really clear that no shame, no blame, none of us could have anticipated this and the financial situation which we may have found ourselves in. So give yourself some, like an easy ride when it comes to assessing your financial situation, and recognizing that we're all going to go through a period of adapting, and that, you know, there's going to be highs and lows with that. So giving yourself time and space and asking yourself what you need and asking for help when you need it, because hopefully we do all see the opportunities and make the most of this retreat and being productive with our time, but just, you know, recognizing when we need to sustain ourselves and look after ourselves and asking for help when we need it. But it's a nice pause to really ask ourselves how we want to show up and what our values are, and yeah, how to make the most of this time.
Nice, thank you. Okay, great. Well, I think we're a little bit over time, so we'll wrap up there. But I just want to say thank you so much to Stacey and to Ben for taking the time to share all of your wisdom and positive energy and advice to everyone. And for everybody who joined, thank you so much for joining. We'll send round, this has all been recorded, so we'll send this round later for any bits that you missed. And yeah, it's just good to see you guys I would encourage those of you who are part of the alumni community to, you know, use the Facebook group, keep in touch, let's help each other, because it's going to be, you know, we're all in it together. And I think ultimately, regardless of, we've got this amazing community, whether it's the Rebel Book Club community, the Escape community, all of those kind of communities that we're going to get through it together. And I think that's got to be our main thing of how can we keep that going. So keep sharing, keep helping each other, and we'll get there.
Thanks,
yeah,
Skye.
no worries.
Thanks,
All
Skye.
right.
Nice
We'll
to
see
see
you
everyone.
later. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.